Thank you for joining us on Tech Tuesday. As usual, just talking. How many of you are familiar with Deacon's Masterpiece? It's a poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes. And it talks about somebody who wanted to build a perfect one-horse shay, and you can see a picture on the bottom. And I didn't reproduce the entire poem, just two stanzas. And I changed the words a bit. Instead of a one-horse shay, he's trying to build a patent, and he did it so well that it ran for 20 years. Now, here's the point. When you build something, there's always a weakness somewhere. And that's why it breaks down instead of wearing out. So in the poem, the guy chose all of the perfect parts, and they were all just as good as each other. And for 100 years, nothing happened. And after 100 years, suddenly the entire one-horse shay fell apart and turned to dust. Now, why is this relevant for patents? And the reason why it's relevant is because when we write patents, we want them to be perfect. I mean, the clients want them to be perfect too. And the question is, how do we go about it? So we're creating something. We're creating a document. It does stuff. I think it's just like building a one-horse shay. More important, we have a mindset. Hopefully the mindset is intentional. If the mindset is not intentional, please make it intentional. Why? Because when you build something, as an engineer at least, you always have a trade-off. At the very least, you have a time limit and you have a budget. But you have to decide if to take more risks or fewer risks, to give more examples about different things or more examples about the same thing. So in the end, any application you write can't really be perfect in all ways for all things. So you have to choose some sort of attitudes that you'll follow. If you don't do it, you can definitely write a patent which isn't as good. More than that, when we write a patent, we have in mind some IP strategy. And there is a connection between the IP strategy that we have and the way in which we're going to draft and prosecute the application. So I'm going to present a few different attitudes, approaches, mindsets, and none of them are perfect. And in real life, you're probably going to do some sort of mix between them. And here's the time to remind you that patents are probabilistic. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So in any case, you need to have more than one patent. But I am talking about one patent. So one attitude is to make a work of art, like the Mona Lisa. And this is what I call doing it the right way. When you do it the right way, you have a context, and you have an invention, and you have sub-inventions, and there's laws regarding the scope and enablement. And then we approach it, let's call it as engineers or scientists, and we analyze the invention, and we describe it as best we can in view of all of these laws. And we probably do a good prior art search, and we draft the claims in view of the art and our analysis of it. And when we practice, when we do prosecution, we're going to do the best practices, and we're going to avoid file wrapper and so on. Okay, so this is what I call doing it the right way. And the assumption is that if we do it the right way, then the end result will be very good indeed. Okay, that's one way of writing a patent. There's an issue, many issues, of course, but the leading issue is good for what? And I have what I call a leading question, which is a question you ask yourself every time you have to make a decision. And the question you ask, what is the right way to do it? I have an example in the patent. What is the right way to describe the example? The examiner gave me a rejection. What is the right way to respond to that rejection? A bit more detail. When I analyze the invention, there's a right way to do it. When I draft a specification, there's a right way to do it. When I write a claim, there's a right way to do it. When I prosecute, when I have patent opposition, when I'm opposing a patent, there's a right way to prepare for it. When I'm doing licensing or other pre-litigation activities, anything you do, there's a right way to do it. Now, I'm sure if you ask different patent attorneys, each one will recommend a different right way of doing it. But we can agree that there's definitely wrong ways of doing it. There are ways that you won't have good support. There are ways that you're going to have throwaway lines in the application. There are ways in which the claim lacks clarity. There are ways in which you don't have the right dependent claims. I could go on with a list of wrong ways of doing it. That's one attitude. And the question you should ask, if you're working using the right way, should you not use a checklist so that you can confirm that indeed you did all of the things you're supposed to do? So the big benefit of what is right is that it gives you a lot of focus when you're writing the patent, and the patent is a tool, and what it is that you're planning on getting, that's what you're going to get. Question we can ask is, where is adaptability? If you did everything right, but now you need to adapt, where do you adapt? The adaptation can often be a level above. Okay, we have more than one patent application. We have a business strategy, which includes an IP strategy, which needs a certain tool. So if we want to adapt something, we adapt the strategy, not the patent. One of the problems is, however, that it might be more difficult to do adaptivity at a higher level, or that the people don't know what to ask for. In other words, as a patent attorney, you're doing everything right, but the people telling you what they want don't really know what they want. That's one set of problems. A different problem is that we're not alone. We have an adversary. Sometimes adversary is what I call nature. People publishing papers, prior art you didn't find, and so on. Sometimes it's an examiner, and we've all met examiners that give new meaning to broadest reasonable interpretation. They try to misinterpret your patent, match it to prior art that they have lying around, and so on. The law is changing, usually in ways that are not convenient. The world itself is changing. The market might change. And you might actually have an enemy. In other words, we have a client, we're writing patents because of the competition. The competition might not appreciate that we wrote patents. They might want to bypass the patents or cancel the patents or do something bad to our client. And we're writing the patents in view of the adversary. Now, what's common for all of these adversaries is that they will be looking for weakness in the patent. So we said before that in the one-horse shay, he built it so no part was weaker than another, but we know that our enemy will be looking for a weakness. So here's a picture of a model of Edinburgh Castle, and it's impregnable. Well, maybe it isn't, that doesn't matter. But it's a different attitude towards writing a patent. First, you figure out what it is you want to protect. We make sure that it's well defined. Then we draft a patent application that gives great protection, and we figure out fallback positions. And as you can see in the castle, you have a wall, and then you have another wall, and then you have yet another protected part inside. So we have fallbacks. Then we predict what weakness you might have, and then we make sure they're dealt with. Like maybe over here is a weakness, so we prepare over here a spot where you can pour boiling oil on whoever comes. And that gives you a patent that nobody can crack. Now, the assumption is that if we manage to build a patent with no weak spot, then it's not going to fail. The issue is that there usually is a weakness and you probably won't find it, and maybe it can be fixable and maybe not. In any case, the leading question that people ask is, what is the weakness of X, whatever X might be? Okay, second. That's a leading question you should ask. And again, when you write a claim, you say, what's the weakness in this claim? When you have write an argument to the examiner, you ask, what's the weakness in the argument I'm making for the examiner? So obviously a strong patent is good. Definitely as part of the strategy, we know you're going to need some strong spots. The question is that the best we can do? Is the best we can do is have a strong patent? And related to that question is, do we have a clear strategy which is built upon having these strong patents? One of the big risks is the enemy will simply go around us. We're going to have an impregnable fortress, and the enemy will say, okay, you have this great patent, and we're going to go around the patent. And the classic example in modern days is a Maginot Line, which did have a weak spot, which failed, and the German army went around it. And most important, the overall strategy failed because it was based on certain assumptions on what the enemy would do and what the line would do. So that's exactly where we don't want to be. We don't want to have a company that has 10 very strong, indestructible patents, and it turns out that one or more of them do have weak spots, and the competition can simply walk around the patents and steals the market away from us. So here's another attitude. And the attitude is, we will meet our goals. Okay, what does that mean? We write a focused application. We don't ask, what is the invention? We don't ask, what do we want to protect? We say, what is the goal of this application? And everything we do is in view of the goal, and we don't waste energy on what is not the goal. It's, like a guide missile. We have a target, we know what we want to hit, and the question is, what claims should I draft? The answer is claims that are focused on the goal. And the assumption is, if we know what we want, we can get it. The issue is that, we deal in innovation. Innovation means change. Change includes changing of the goals. In other words, if we write a patent like a guided missile, it could be that by the time we get it or by the time the company needs it, that's not a goal anymore. And if we go to focused application, it doesn't do that. In any case, the leading question is, does doing such and such support or detract from reaching our goal? If we add another argument in the response to the office action, does it help our goal, let's say, of scaling the competition, or not? Like I said, goals change. And the question we always ask is, will the focused patent be able to support the new goals? Somewhat related problem is that patent applications are public. So the adversary can read your patent, identify your goal, identify how you're getting there, and you really, really focus, and he builds some sort of dedicated weapon, and it doesn't matter what that's going to be, and he shoots down your patent. I'd like to introduce a concept from evolution called the exaptation. And what it is that some part of the body evolves for one reason, and then it is used for something else. And a classic example is bird feathers. This is from Wikipedia. So T-Rex had feathers, but we know he didn't fly. But once birds had feathers, they could be used for flight. after they were used for flight, then evolution continued and made them even better for flight. So patents can take this into account, and here we have another option, which I call exposure potential. So any invention has potential. I'm not going to ask how we know what the potential is. I'm going to suggest a way of dealing with it. So an invention has some sort of essence, usually more than one, and we paint, and that's why I put a picture of a palette. We paint an application of what could happen. So we identify what the essence of the invention is, and like I said, more than one, and we identify the consequences of that. And even though you built an invention to solve one problem, you probably have developed features which could be useful to solve other problems. In any case, we predict where the essences might go and how they might interact with the world. We provide support for each one of these possibilities. And just so you don't think that I'm living in La La Land, we'll have to use magical insight to do triage and fit all of this within the budget. Okay, it is not possible to write an application which identifies all of the essences and all of the consequences and provide support for all of them and still meet any reasonable budget. You have to use some sort of magical insight or intuition to decide what you put in and what you don't. In any case, the assumption is we're not sure where we're going. The issue is that futurism, meaning figuring out what the future will look like, is not a reliable science. In any case, the leading question is, what is the essence of X and how does it interact with the world? And you ask this question about the invention, and when you make an argument with the patent office, for example, the argument won't be based on what the examiner understands or doesn't understand, but rather on what is the essence of the invention and why the examiner didn't understand it and why it is not found in the prior art. Okay, so each one of these questions and each one of these mindsets leads you in a different way of dealing with the entire process of patent acquisition and usage. I added a bonus question, which wasn't relevant for the other mindsets, but is relevant here. The question is, what does the invention potentially unlock or unfold in the world? Okay, it's not just consequences, but once we have this invention, things are going to change. What's going to change? Which one is best? I have no idea. Okay. None of them is better. And definitely each one has its place. I'd say more than that, in a patent portfolio, you're probably going to have all of them. Sometimes you're going to have one patent which is built on a combination of two of these approaches. Oh, and there's more mindsets which I didn't write down because I didn't want to run out of time. I would say that the one which is most relevant depends on the amount of knowledge you have and the amount of strategy you have. And I'm talking both about the client and about the patent attorney. Also, how you manage your IP portfolio and budget also matters. And, competition. If you know about your competition, you should do something about them. If you don't have any competition, then maybe you want to build patents that are not goal-directed. I don't know. Warning, obviously, these mindsets are simple sketches on one page. They have more details when you want to apply them, and they have more shortcomings than I actually presented. All I aim to do is just to give you a way of organizing different ways of approaching patent work. I tried to develop a question like I had in other examples. So let's assume you have a client who's a startup and they invented, I'm going to call it sunscreen applique. So it's sheets and they have a visual design and you can just put them on your arm and then you get both sunscreen protection and you get decoration. Okay, this client, just walks in, he's a startup. The question is, which mindset do you think would be most suitable? Should you write a work of art? Should you be goal-oriented? Should you be exploring your potential? Should you build a impregnable castle? Let me give you just an example. If we're building a product and we believe in that product and we don't care about anything else, maybe building an impregnable castle is a right way to do it, because then we will have a patent that nobody can copy what we're doing. It might be wrong, but it could be exactly what the client's looking for. And that's why I gave you a bonus question. What does the client need? The answer depends not only on some esoteric IP considerations, but even more so on what the client's business strategy looks like and what they consider to be risks and opportunities. Okay, I am stopping the recording.